North Korean dictator Kim Jong Un is in Russia for a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. They are expected to talk about North Korea potentially providing weapons and ammunition for Russia to use in its ongoing war in Ukraine.
It is a rare trip for Kim, who last met with Putin in 2019 and has not left the country in 3 years. Both Moscow and Pyongyang have denied the meeting has anything to do with a potential arms deal.
Joining us to discuss this meeting are Euro-Atlantic security analyst Natalie Melnichuk and retired Brigadier General Michael McDaniel, who's also the director of Homeland Law at Cooley Law School. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
So, Natalie, I'll start with you. As Jeff mentioned, both of the countries have denied that this weapon is about North Korea supplying weapons for Russia. What else could it possibly be about?
This particular summit is about all sorts of interesting points, not least of which is the showmanship. Here we have two nations celebrating a summit, North Korea and Russia. This would not have been a celebration or a showpiece for Russia even a year and a half ago. But because of this war, Russia has depleted its artillery, its munitions, its rockets. It's laid it all out on the field in Ukraine, and it's a war on Ukraine. So it is desperate for resupply, and North Korea happens to have a long history with the former Soviet Union when Moscow supplied weapons, arms, technology to start and build their nuclear industry in North Korea. So what we're actually seeing is a summit resuscitating and resurrecting a Cold War alliance dating back to the Korean War of 1950 to 53. One would have never thought Russia would have much to gain from a tight partnership with North Korea. Indeed, it's always had more to give than it wished to receive. At this point, we see the unprecedented. Russia turning to North Korea for help. And that's the real story here.
Wow. Michael, let's bring you into this conversation. Why should Americans care what's going on between Russia and China and the Russian war with Ukraine? Why is it important for Americans to be up to date on what's going on here?
The war between Russia and Ukraine is just a first step in what could be just an incredible tipping point for democracy in Western Europe and other nations as well. And it's also, in terms of bringing North Korea into this, there's a great impact on South Korea. It's a very strong ally and trading partner of the United States. So we've got strong commitments in Europe. We've got strong commitments in South Korea. As was said, we have to look very closely at this new relationship, or this resuscitation of this relationship between North Korea and Russia. There is a certain reek of desperation to it on the part of Russia. As was said, Russia is reaching out to a much smaller nation, but one which has stockpiled artillery in the same caliber that Russia uses as a Cold War legacy, as well as other rounds. And on its surface, this is a guns for grains deal, but I think there's much more to it.
So then who would be behind North Korea? Push has come to shove. Let's say this deal doesn't work out, or North Korea can only help out so much. What then? What state is Russia in with its war in Ukraine? If North Korea is not there, then what?
Well, some folks in Washington are saying it's not that Russia chose to have this summit with North Korea, but it has no choice other than to turn to North Korea for these munitions and supplies. So while we've seen Iran supplying Shahed drones and helping Russia start its own assembly facility for the drones in Russia, and later it'll become a production facility of the Iranian drones. At this time, because of the sanctions, Russia doesn't really have any choice but to turn to North Korea, another country that unfortunately has shown itself willing to break UN sanctions, sanctions which Russia has voted for. Yeah. Russia will be breaking its own sanctions with North Korea if it does accept weapons from them, but we're pretty sure that they don't mind doing that, as we saw the Wagner Group accepting munitions and rockets from North Korea in November of 22.
Michael, if a potential arms deal does indeed go down, as a Homeland Security expert, just how dangerous is this for the world?
It all depends upon what is exchanged here. I have to believe that North Korea is looking to offload its Cold War legacy artillery and AK-47 rounds, as opposed to anything more sophisticated than that. It has only been recently, in the last 5 years or so, that their weapons technology has had a great degree of sophistication, and I think they want to sort of have, from a strategic standpoint, sort of move their posture from Cold War unguided artillery towards multiple launch systems, radar-guided artillery, and of course, they're trying to build their nuclear capability. So I think they're going to be looking to Russia after food, fuel, fertilizer. They're going to be looking to Russia for some sort of military technology. The question is whether Russia will provide it. They've been pretty guarded about that in the past.
So let's say that does happen. You know, final thoughts here, Natalie. If a deal does go down, arms, ammunition are provided, maybe that food aid as well. What happens if the sanctions are violated? How do you think the rest of the world community responds?
Well, the UN has already spoken through its capitals. Washington came out today saying there will be increased sanctions both on North Korea and on Russia, knowing the desperate straits that North Korea is in. Its people are starving. There is a famine, both due to COVID and then the grain embargo. And in Russia, Russia lost $100 billion in revenue from oil and gas alone because of sanctions on them last year. So it can only get worse for them. North Korea can become a rogue actor. If President Kim takes this to heart, if his ego grows disproportionately to reality, we could see an activist President Kim in the Asia-Pacific region causing trouble for a lot of nations that are allies of the United States.
Well, retired Brigadier General Michael McDaniel and Euro-Atlantic security analyst Natalie Melanchuk, we appreciate both of you being here tonight.